Good morning and welcome to Crack the Mic with Agent of Change, DeCorey Davis. And this week's segment is entitled Systemic Racism Part 2. Now, according to Wikipedia, it defines it as institutional racism and is a form of racism that is embedded in the laws and regulation of society or organizations. In fact, it manifests itself as discrimination in the areas such as criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, education, and political representation. Now, according to one of our most notable leaders in our community, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., spoke about this very issue when he delivered a speech to over 7,000 people on March the 17th of 1967 at UC Berkeley Sproul Plaza in Berkeley, California. Dr. King stated the following, saying that true racial equality cannot be reached without radical structural changes in society. In fact, justice for Black people will not flow into this society merely from court decisions nor from fountains of political oratory. White America must recognize that justice for Black people cannot be achieved without radical change in the structure of our society. And back to the podcast this week to help further this discussion is Dr. Kenyatta Arnett, AP for DeKalb County Public Schools, and Judge Christy Collins of the Florida Circuit, and also Izell Wallace, who is our executive producer to the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so I'll get started with a question. Are certain regions of the country more plagued by systemic racism than others? And if so, why?
So I'll jump in first. So I don't know that I can, or that I can testify to that. Surely I'm not an expert or on systemic racism as it throughout the country and different areas of the country. It definitely could be. I don't know. I don't know, but what I do know that does it exist? Yes. Are certain areas of the country more plagued by it? Again, I don't know. I could only speak with my area. And like I said, I like to also, while recognizing issues that we still face, also make sure that we are speaking about things that are forward-looking too. And we talked about it last week on the last segment, where we talked about, making sure that we work to diversify all these different areas, and that people are willing to get out there and put themselves out there. We want to see our communities be more active in voting and possibly running for office. I ran for office last year, and just participating in our community so that we can work to just come together and see more opportunity for persons of color, for communities of color, to just be more active in just making things better for everyone. And we were talking a lot about the homeless population in the last segment, and we were talking about veterans and how it disproportionately affects veterans and recent people who were released from jail or prison, and which disproportionately affects people of color in a lot of instances. So I just definitely would like to see just that people just get more involved. And it's definitely happening, but we can do a whole lot more. I've been encouraged over the last, last couple of years about people becoming more involved and more aware of things that they can get involved in, and they can actually make some real change. Because sometimes, unfortunately, people don't realize that the way that systems are set up and the outcomes can produce this disparate effect. And sometimes people do realize it, but they feel helpless to change it. So then they ignore it. That happens in every community, whether you're a person of color or not. If you feel helpless to change something or to work on something, sometimes it may seem easier just to ignore it or close your eyes. So I'm just encouraging everyone to get involved, because we all share this planet, and we all have to live here. And so definitely I want to be an active participant in making it a better place for all of us to live and work and raise our children.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I have a
Brother DeCroy, go ahead.
Oh no, it's on you, Mr. Dr. Arnett. I'm sorry.
I definitely concur with the judge, but I would say I think there are some areas where systemic racism may be more obvious. I'm not going to say more prevalent, but maybe more obvious, especially as we look at what's happening over the last couple of years with the elections. And you have states that are very blatant about trying to change their voter registration rules because they're intentional about making it more challenging or more difficult for people of color to register, and also discouraging people to vote. So I think we do have areas, pockets around this nation where it is more obvious than in other areas. You have some areas that are very progressive. You know, when you look at how people live in a place like New York City or Los Angeles or Atlanta compared to small rural town in Mississippi, you know, I think we will see a lot of differences in how laws are approached or written, and see that there's probably a definite disparity in how people are treated in these different areas. So I think that does make a difference.
I like to say, you know, it's partly due to Reconstruction era that took place after the Civil War of 1865 through 1877, during which the United States grappled with the challenges of reintegrating into the Union the states that had succeeded, and in determining the legal status of African Americans. And suffice it to say, it was mostly Southern states. Now, by 1877, in a climate of economic crises, cost of protecting freedom of African Americans became a price unwilling. It was the American government was unwilling to pay. Now, the long rollback began in earnest. The period of retrenchment, voter suppression, as you suggested, Dr. Arnett, and Jim Crow laws, and quasi-re-enslavement that was caused by white Southerners. Ironically, they called it redemption. Now, I would say, and as you wonderfully stated, Dr. Arnett, you can see it really manifest itself more so in Southern states as opposed to the Northern states. And I think it's partly because of Reconstruction. Those are my thoughts.
And
I would definitely agree with you.
I have one more question. Are politics a motive for some policies that adversely affect communities of color, such as the 2017 travel bans instituted by then President Donald Trump?
Can you restate your question?
Are politics a motive for some policies that adversely affect communities of color?
Most definitely. That's politics is definitely a part of the problem and the process, because you have politicians who get into office, but we have to wonder: are they there to serve the needs and desires of the constituents that they've been elected to represent? But or are they there to represent the billionaires who fund their campaigns? Who are the lobbyists who put money into their platforms? Who are they really there to serve? And so politics is definitely a major part of the problem in this country, and especially when it comes to systemic racism, because these politicians, the ones we've elected, are the ones who wrote the systemically racist laws. The ones we elected and put up there on Capitol Hill are the ones who have written the laws, and they're the ones who continue to endorse the law. And as we're seeing now, for those who follow the news now, they're the same ones who fight against the changing of laws. You had a bill to protect voter rights in this, but the elected officials that we have would not support it, and the Senate would not vote on it. They would not support it. These are the people we put in office. We voted for them. And here it is, they're not concerned about protecting our right to vote. Why? Because they're there to serve the majority, which does not look like us. The majority, because they like to play into the fears of people. One thing we saw with the former President Trump, is he liked to highlight Mexicans and the Africans. And in fact, he referred to countries, I won't even repeat the explicative that he used when he refers to these countries, and he played into people's fears. He played into the fears of the rural America residents. The Mexicans are coming to take your job. They're coming to rape your daughters. They're going to rape your children. The blacks are going to steal. They're going to loot. And, he played into people's fears. And now we have these same politicians who are still standing on some of the rhetoric that he spouted forth, but they won't vote on changing laws that would give people of color the same rights, equal rights in every aspect of the law. We get in trouble. The book gets thrown at us differently than it does someone else. We had the young man in Wisconsin, in Wisconsin, was it the Kyle with the gun? But he's at home. He went back to school, because he said he was fearful for his life, but you were in the neighborhood that didn't belong to you with an AK-47 at 15. What were you doing there? You know what I'm saying? But here it is. We have teenage boys now. We have a student in our school district now who had a gun.
Wow.
He didn't shoot any, and this just happened within the last couple of weeks. He didn't shoot anybody. He brought it out of fear and wound up shooting himself. Guess where he is? He's handcuffed to a hospital bed right now. And when he gets out of there, he's going where? To jail. And he shot himself. This other young man, same age, shot and killed 2 people. So politics is the problem. Because politics becomes a game when it comes to the lives of people. And who are they really there to serve? Is it the big business, or is it the people, is the mom and pop around up the block who's just struggling to make it? That's my soapbox on that one.
Now, I just want to play the devil's advocate for a moment, because you did mention Isaiah, the travel ban.
Yes.
And I think it's worth noting that the travel ban was upheld by the Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision. In fact, the court cited that President Trump's power to secure the country's border delegated by Congress over decades of immigration lawmaking was not undermined by Mr. Trump. Trump's history of incendiary statements about the danger he said Muslims pose to the United States. So just on its face, that, if I can play the devil's advocate, the travel ban was just to protect our national security.
But now I'm going to play the angel of this. The angel. Because if you're going to put a travel ban on foreign travelers, then why wasn't the travel ban put on European countries? There are violent people who come from European countries. There are violent, we know there's espionage and all kinds of things that come from Russia, but there was no travel ban. In fact, he went to Russia because that's his friend. You know, so I think in your question, it wasn't an, I would support your position if it was an equitable thing, if we looked at foreign travel from every country. But when you're only looking at foreign travel for people who came from African countries or Muslim nations, that's not fair. That's not fair because it was not an equitable thing. It was a color thing. So you again made people fearful of the Muslim, that every Muslim is a terrorist. Well, I would hasten to say, if that was the position, then we would think every white Christian is a terrorist too, because they're the ones that slaughtered Black people in this country. You know,
wow.
So you know, so we can't. I understood in theory the travel ban. You know, if you're trying to protect people from COVID and all this other stuff, yeah, that makes sense. But it was not across the board. You know, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't across the board. You were still playing into those fears with Muslims, and you played into the fears of Asians, you know, saying it was the Chinese flu and all these other things. And so it just doesn't help. Again, it's the politic game that we just mentioned in the previous question, where politics is at the heart of a lot of these disparities and the inequities that we're experiencing in this country.
Can I also
money
add?
game.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I also add that on his campaign website in 2017, that Donald Trump also stated that he wanted to impede Muslim immigration to America, you know, and that had to be taken down, you know, because that was really revealing the reason behind his actions.
Right.
Well, it is also stated that Trump stated his reason for the ban was to keep radical terrorist groups out of the country. Now, and it was
radical white people that did the January 6th invasion at the Capitol.
Well stated.
And he waved them on and cheered them from the sidelines and wanted to get them. So that's why I don't support that. You know, Black Lives Matter. The March of Black Lives Matter march. Remember, he said they were terrorists. They were Black terrorists, and they were angry people. And they tear gassed those people in front of a church so he could take a picture. But here it is. He praised people who stormed the United States Capitol, stormed the building like we were in a movie, breaking windows. I mean, assaulting and killing some of our own nation's Capitol security officers. But he praised them, but he demonized innocent Black, African, Hispanic, Asian young people that were out protesting. Black lives must matter too.
I agree. Now I want to move on, if we can, for a moment to this next question. Can individuals such as the president make a difference in ending systemic racism? And would you encourage President Joe Biden to make the attempt?
Well, let me put the president has influence, but the president does not have autonomous executive authority in this nation. This is not a dictatorship. And we've seen that again. I'll go back to President Obama, who proposed different laws and bills, but the Congress that we had said no. And it's the same with Joe Biden. He can initiate, which he's tried to do with some plans already with the infrastructure bill. He can propose, but if the people, the senators and House of Representative folks that we voted for, the people that represent our local communities don't support, then it's still not going to happen. And I think it's unfair for us to hold the president solely responsible, because presidents can propose and they can sign off, but they can't make decisions on their own. They can't just go in like it's the boardroom and say, you're going to do this or you're not going to be here. We saw that with the former president. And that's just not how our political system works. And I think that's where where people have a lack understanding that that's not how our system works. The president can't just go in and say, we're going to give reparations to all Black people and sign the bill and say it's done. It doesn't happen like that. The Senate, the House of Representatives and the Senate, they have to vote. Congress has to vote on all of this stuff. And as we see, they're so split. They in fact, Mitch McConnell vowed when Biden got voted in, he said, I'm not going to support anything that he proposes. So we already know Joe Biden has an uphill journey, because the Republican Party already said we are not going to support anything he proposes. We're not. Well, that's 50%, practically 50% of the voting body of our government. So we already know a lot of stuff is going to be met with a brick wall.
Right. Your thoughts, Isaiah?
I just want to say, that going back to the Emancipation Proclamation, where Abraham Lincoln was able to executively proclaim, like an executive order, that some of our presidents have done, that all enslaved people were free. To me, the president hasn't lost an authority like that. If anything, it's been strengthened, because now in the 21st century, people are under a stricter moral standard. It's not, George Floyd is not Emmett Till. The crime will be punished in my eyes. So I just said that to say that I believe that the president does have that power. He's just scared to use it, and I would encourage him to do so as quickly as he can.
Oh, I'm not rebutting. Because I obviously don't agree, because I know the president can propose, but because we do not live in a dictatorship, the president cannot go in and just say, do this, and it becomes a law. That's just not how our system works. In another type of world, it would, but that's just not how it works. And there was more behind the Emancipation Proclamation that we don't discuss, but that was a political farce as well. If it was so executive, then everybody in America would have known about it at the same time. But here it is. That's why we celebrate Juneteenth, because people in certain regions didn't find out till a whole year later.
Yes.
And not only that, but people rejected the rule. So yeah, they're free, but then we erected more systemic laws to now you have the militia that is now allowed to go hunt in these red line communities to kill any Black person you see on the street. So you have sundown towns. And so yes, on one hand, it said you're free, but now we just give rights to the majority again to erect other laws to do what they want, because states still have the right to create their own state laws. So it's just so much to the process that,
Right.
So I think the president can influence, but I don't think he can make, I agree, I think the president can influence, but he can't make just a flat out law change on his own.
And I would like to point out something that, since we were talking about President Trump, I like to point out something that I think is, and this is one of his great pieces of legislation that really helped African Americans. The First Step Act, formerly known as the Formerly Incarcerated Reentry Society, transforms safely transitioning every person act. That was met through bipartisan efforts, but it was led by President Trump and the Republicans, who did a wonderful job, which they did in tackling our the prison system here in the country, which is a hot mess, and we all know that. But he was quite intrepid in his approach to getting it done, and he did. So I'll digress on that point. But I have another question. Now, what are some legislative policies that can be made through bipartisan efforts that could put an end to systemic racism in you guys' view?
I mean, the most obvious one right now, most current, is the voter regulation. You know, establishing, clear voter rights and legislation that protect every American's right to vote and not just a privileged few. That would be, because whether you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter what race, gender, or political party, voting is for everyone. And so erecting rules that will help support the rights of everyone is a bipartisan thing that could be done. But again, they're fighting because the Republicans propose this, so the Democrats won't vote for that. The Democrats propose this, so the Republicans won't vote for that. And we've made it partisan. They're so busy making partisan decisions instead of thinking what is for the collective good of everyone. But that's one thing that can help everybody. Establishing just that simple thing, voter, because we still have the privilege to vote. We don't technically, African Americans still don't have the right to vote. They got to come back every so many years and reestablish our privilege to vote. You know what I'm saying? So that in itself is problematic.
Right.
Because we are not seen as a whole individual according to the Constitution. Our privilege to vote, our privilege has to be renewed every so many years. And so we don't have full right to vote to be quiet as is kept. We have to get the privilege renewed. What happens when they get somebody in office who says, we tired of renewing their right? They technically can stop us from being able to vote because we have not been given full authority to vote. Our right, our privilege to vote is renewed every so many years. So let's fix that. Let's amend the Constitution and go back and say we the people is inclusive of the African American. And let's take out the clauses later on in the Constitution that define us as property, because it's still in there. It's still in there that we are defined as property, not a whole man or whole woman. We are property to be owned by someone else. So when you take the reins, the price tag off of us, then maybe we can be full persons and have full rights in this country. But they don't want to do that because they know the power that we would have if we were really considered full. If we knew the power that we really had if we were a whole person. So, you have policies that are written to make us less than, if that makes sense. They don't want you to feel. I'm sorry?
No, I say understood. No, I understood what you were saying.
Yeah. So I think if we could start with that, they won't even come together on healthcare. You know what I'm saying? Everybody needs healthcare. Everybody gets sick. I don't care what race, gender, sexual orientation you are. People get sick. Everybody needs healthcare. And we won't come together on that. Minimum wage. People need a good living wage. We won't come together on that because we say, no, because that's going to make the welfare mom not want to go to work anymore. Oh, well, white people are on welfare too if nobody told you. You know, white folks is on the system too, so it's gonna help them too. You know, and
That's
it's like, oh my god, it helps everybody. And I just don't think we see stuff like that. We colorize everything, and that is in itself problematic.
couldn't agree with you
Yeah.
more, Dr. Arnett. Your thoughts on it, Isaiah?
I mean, I really stand behind what Dr. Arnett said. Just one thing that I would add is our whole the way our system is ran by lobbyists and big corporations and big people who are moving these political entities to their will.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I think they could come together and stop. I don't know if you ever heard of the super PAC. It's where you could invest millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into a entity and use that to fund a campaign for someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There should be some sort of dollar limit. Our political system is based on, supposedly equality and everybody's vote being equal. So, it should be more grassroots than anything. If you're able to get to the highest office in the land, you should have the true support of the majority of people.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, because like you said, the lobbyists, we vote them in, but they follow the whims of the people with the big dollars.
That's true.
But I'm passionate when it comes to healthcare. I've seen the horrors of it. I had an aunt who was disabled, and the government literally, the state of Georgia, cut her benefits down to $31 a month for food.
Wow.
So what in this country is someone who worked from the time they were 14 to the time they were, their health declined at the age of 60, how are you going to give them $31 a month for food? Who can survive off $31?
Wow.
That goes back to what we spoke about last week with homelessness. My aunt was just a moment away from homelessness if she didn't have nieces, nephews, children who were helping to make sure she had, because she was juggling. How do I spend this $31? I'm going to buy groceries with $31, and they're taking chunks out of her Social Security. It's like, what do we do in this country? We're not thinking what's in the best interest of the people. It's what's in best interest of me and my campaign and the people that fund me because they're buying me.
That's true. That's true. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for Systemic Racism Part 2. And I'll just like to thank my illustrious guest, Isaiah Wallace, executive producer to Crack the Mic Show, podcast that is, I'm sorry, and Dr. Kenyatta Arnett, AP with the DeKalb County Public Schools, and also Judge Christy Collins of the Ninth Circuit of Florida. And I'd like to leave you guys, my listeners, that is, with this final quote from MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., that is. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound with the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final words. In the words of Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, that is. And again, this is your Agent of Change signing off with this week's segment, Systemic Racism, Part 2. Peace.